Tonight, I learned the importance of a balance in an ecosystem. I used to think my mother was insane, the way she planted flowers wherever she wanted, instead of neatly in beds, the way she hung dried herbs in the kitchen. The thing that probably got to me the most was her radical acceptance of everything. "Oh, leave the wasp nest be. They eat caterpillars." "Why would I bother the spiders in the bathroom? Do you see any other bugs?" "Oh, leave Mr. Benson. His bark is worse than his bite if you don't cross him." I tried to understand my mom, but it was hard. She talked about balance and ecosystems, but my friends didn't have cobwebs in their bathrooms, worry about getting stung, or chart a wide berth around mean Mr. Benson. Still, I tried. I left the wasps and spiders alone. I brought over the pies to Mr. Benson that my mom baked for him. Then one night, I walked home from my friends. It wasn't far, but there was a stretch of dark woods along the way that made the hair on my neck rise. Tonight was no different. The feeling of being watched was intense. I knew my mom was waiting for me on the porch, but our house was still out of sight. Ahead of me, the bushes rustled. I froze. I was so focused on the woods ahead of me that I nearly jumped out of my skin when a guttural moan sounded behind me. I whipped around and time slowed as my brain tried to compute what staggered out of the woods. I think it was supposed to be a deer, standing on its hind legs. The creature's head snapped toward me. I turned to run, tripped, and fell. Hyperventilating, I curled into a ball. Then I heard the bushes behind me rustle again. I felt something large burst out of the trees and fly over me, pinning the creature to the ground with a vicious growl. The creature was hairy, massive, and from the sounds that the deer creature was making, very hungry. I crawled backward away from them, still unable to stand. The hairy creature stood on its hind legs, like the deer, and turned to me. This creature, however, began to change as it approached. By the time it reached me, it had shrunk down to the normal person size and had taken the shape of Mr. Benson. He scanned the forest and then offered me a hand up, saying only, "It's late. You should head home." I held it together pretty well until I saw my mom waiting on the porch. Then the sobs ripped through me as I threw myself into her arms. I gave her a halting accord of my ordeal and finished gravely, "Mom, I think Mr. Benson is some kind of monster." She smiled. "Of course he is, sweetheart." "You knew?" "Well, yes. Do you see any other monsters around here?" I used to think my mom was insane. Now, I know she's a genius.